Good morning. Welcome to the second session of Design for Drupal. Awesome conference. They let me in this means I'm going to be going a little bit afield from design. So, my name is Ben Melançon. I am a co-founder and worker-owner at Agaric, a web development cooperative with currently 6 worker-owners, including Michelle Metz here in the front, Nikki, who I've co-presented with, so I may just call on her to talk at some point. But that is not part of the deal right now. I am presenting on how Drupal as a service can save our livelihoods and our lives. And I will try not to touch my connections here. And we'll ignore the fact that I did not update the cover slide from Drupal Camp Twin Cities, but I updated all the other slides, so I'm going to be a little disorganized. So, viewers, people in my era of Drupal developers, Agaric was founded in 2006. If I were starting with the same kind of project that I sort of got into Drupal for, I probably wouldn't choose Drupal. There's so many options, and what I'm going to talk about mostly in this talk is the software as a service options. Like, I need a website, like, you download Drupal. Now, I need a website, you go to a service, WordPress.com or Squarespace or Wix, and you get a website. So it's no longer that sort of opening thing that it used to be. And, to quote some Boston Drupalistas, who I'll leave anonymous for this, but Drupal is no longer a do-it-in-your-garage exciting thing. It's not fun. And it needs a team of trained engineers to support it. And this talk will be unpacking what that means for us as a community. But first, I want to welcome you to the Lockheed Martin room here in the Status Center. I did feel I needed to note that despite the large distance that our military contractors try to put between them and what happens with their tools, the current Saudi Arabia-led and U.S. heavily supported attacks on Yemen included a bomb co-built by Lockheed Martin and General Dynamics that blew up a school bus full of children last year with their MK-82 bomb. And this is actually relevant to my topic. There's a big movement in tech right now. It is not in the military contractor space yet. They've had a very long time to get their employees used to the idea of their products doing bad things and to try to put distance and be like, well, we sold it to them, and it's really got nothing to do with us, it just happens to be blowing up people. Yemen is sort of impressive because after approving every possible foreign military adventure for forever, there's actually like significant pushback in our own political system to supporting that war. Unfortunately, it's still ongoing, which is why lots of workers in tech and elsewhere, this is from yesterday, protests by Wayfair workers who build furniture, who don't want their furniture to be used in containment centers by the concentration camps, by ICE, immigration control, custom enforcement, and in particular the contract was the Department of Homeland Security, which is sort of operating overflow cages for people, and the pledged millions and millions of our fellow residents to be rounded up and imprisoned. And so this is furniture workers who are like, no, we're going to try to keep our company from doing that. And there's a whole tech won't build it campaign that's been mostly focused around like Amazon's support for facial recognition and other things being used by law enforcement without any, checks or balances. It's just like, it's basically like racial profiling, like cranked up and automated. And there's workers at places like Google and Amazon, who have been trying to push against that. And so there was a lot of solidarity from tech workers for the furniture workers in this workout. Not that any work isn't ultimately tech work. And so, keep recurring back on the themes. We are in a, there's a lot of things that we need a lot of organization to deal with. And the free software movement and projects like Drupal and many other things that's sort of in this free culture, open culture, free software, like space, were rightfully seen as like a big promise in the future. It's like ground up, like not top down. It's people literally building their own future, building their own platforms, building their own technologies. And Benjamin Mako-Hill, standing probably in the room two things over a year ago, gave a keynote at Leave Your Planet, the Free Software Foundation's annual event, talking about how that a decade ago, the kind of mass collaboration that made Wikipedia and GNU Linux and couch surfing possible was only done by people sort of working freely and collectively in the commons, in the digital commons. And that since that time, a decade ago, that's no longer true. The new proprietary, firm-controlled, and more money-oriented models are replacing and displacing and out-competing these digital models. So that's the graph of couch surfing, which was clearly never going to rise like Airbnb, but it pioneered all of the exact same things that Airbnb took on. So couch surfing, you let someone stay in your place for the night for free, which I've used many times. But now it's way faster and easier to have that confirmed commercial transaction with Airbnb. But Airbnb is using all of the same trust metrics that couchsurfing pioneered. How do you trust someone that you don't know on the internet? Well, it's here's the reviews, here's how you know who they say they are, and everything else, and the whole model. And that he's talking about the people at Harvard Business School who have consciously studied peer production of the open source free software world and tried to figure out how they can pull it into their world, into the commercial world without having to actually contribute back to the commons. And in Drupal, there was sort of a debate about whether contributors should be paid at all, and now that in open source free software, that debate's pretty much over, and it's how do you get contributors paid? And that's one of the main things I'm going to argue is that doing software as a service for free software projects is a revenue model that can get contributors paid. So, so this is sort of the overall trends of GNU Linux sort of starting in the 80s and 1991, and then Apache starting in 1995, and Wikipedia all had fantastic growth and then leveled off right now. Still very healthy projects, but there's nothing starting to have that crazy growth like Wikipedia, people just randomly contributing from wherever for free, grew like crazy. And all of those are from a different era, and so Benjamin Mako-Hill is looking at why. But for whatever the reasons why, Drupal is very much in the same camp. This is weekly project usage, contributions in some ways a little healthier. We've always been a very healthy community, but it's leveled off, and the tiny little bar up there is Drupal 8, which is supposed to be the future. But so our community is possibly in decline, but it's not the end of the world. It's not like the rest of the world is suffering from division, disaster capitalism, and impending doom. Right. All right. So, what is this unique and cool community that we've got going? What if that is part of what can help make the world better? Is that one of the things that's going to be as good a shot as any to make things? So are we the hero that we need to see? We've got a +6 cooperation. We got a technical challenge bonus. We're working better, building inclusive community. Maybe netting out at 0. but working on it, making software that connects people and resources. Drupal does that pretty well. But just to take one more step back and look at what we're up against, what rapid change on a geological timescale looks like, a degree Celsius or a couple degrees Fahrenheit over 1,000 years, and what's happening right now in today's anthropogenic era of human-caused global warming. We've added more than a degree Celsius, more than 2 degrees Fahrenheit in less than 100 years, and most of the warming coming in the last 25. And this graph in XKCD could be extended a little bit longer because we've done nothing to change that around. So just all of the kinds of things that we've been dealing with as humans for a long time, plus yet another existential threat we've sort of thrown on ourselves. But you can imagine a similar line for the ozone layer. And public action actually brought us back to a close to a best case scenario with the ozone layer. And acid rain, sort of in the middle, but definitely not nope, we just couldn't control it, just went wild. And so I don't think these success stories of collective action are talked about enough. But in political science, there's a classic problem of concentrated benefit and distributed cost. And the theory goes, and the practice usually follows, that if you have a concentrated benefit and distributed cost, the people who are getting that benefit are going to fight harder and more effectively for whatever policy or whatever thing benefits them, and the people who have the distributed cost just bear it. And that's certainly been the case with fossil fuel burning. And the fact that extreme wealth correlates with interests that run against humanities as a whole sort of adds an extra challenge, because the people who have the concentrated benefit also control most of the resources. And so the solution is communication and coordination tools and networks capable of giving the distributed many of us the same degree of power to discuss, decide, and direct our organized forces, our organized power, to match that of the concentrated few. Quick aside, most of the wealth extracted from burning fossil fuels as if it were a magic consequence-free source of energy, has probably been wasted. But if I burn down a store while stealing $100 from the cash register, I've destroyed a lot more wealth than I've taken, but should probably still be owed at least giving back $100 in restitution. And as Utah Phillips said, the earth is not dying, or at least can't quite pin down the quote, is not dying, it is being killed, and those who are killing it have names and addresses. There are resources to deal with the problems we have. We have to understand where they are. And this is an amazing chart of what people think the distribution of wealth is, and then what they think it should be. And so you can see even people who are in the top 20, 40% think they should have less. That's what that chart says. And then where the wealth actually is. It's the top 20% has 83, 84, 85% of the wealth. It's not even it's beyond anyone's sense of what's reasonable. But now that you know how extreme wealth inequality is, do you have the power to do anything about it? And no. And so big theme here is that knowledge itself is not power. As Mariam Kaba, a longtime organizer against incarceration and towards transformative justice, says, knowledge is not power. And the implied answer is that organization is power. And this has been known. Historically, under pressure, many people have turned to forming cooperative associations. Are really good, it's original historical research in some ways, so it's not the quickest read, can be a little repetitive, but Jessica Gordon-Nemhart's Collective Courage, which is a history of African American cooperation and economic thought, going back to mostly she covers from the early 1860s. It documents the community under threat, turning to one another in cooperation to support one another. And under external threats, most of these examples, have done a significant job of helping people stay alive, but have not continued and grown, which is also a problem trying to have cooperation in too small of a community. But the Federation of Southern Cooperatives started in 1967 to shore up an economic foundation to the civil rights movement, is still in in play. And so, cooperatives are an economic model, and there is a business opportunity in sort of where we stand in the world right now, and I think that having an economic basis for social movements is critical. And so the sort of social movement I'm proposing that we have, that be one of the ways we organize ourselves, is Livelihoods SaaS, is doing free software as a service. And it's just me and one other guy using the term, but but it is some other guy who independently coined it, so it's totally a movement now. And the fact is, though, it's actually happening. Many companies are. I think that we need to have a conscious understanding of it as a potential tool for good. Like going back to the peer production of free software. Like no one knew that kind of thing was possible. Like the people who started the free software movement figured that producing things out in the open would actually be a disadvantage. Like it's like, well, you don't have the economic incentive of being able to control it. So developers, before the web, well before the web, are not going to have as much economic power if they're sharing their code. And that turned out not to be true. Like the best paid people are often working in free open source software. But the whole idea that you could, there is a successful model only really happened because people who are ideologically committed, who were committed for social purposes to trying out a different model, being like, no, code has to be open for people to have power over their own lives, that's the goal, found out that it was a very effective model of actually producing the code. And that sort of effective, and that was then learned by all of these other companies that we'll get to in a little bit about how to sort of close it back down, how to get the benefits of peer production. But the point is that people who are studying how did anyone figure out to do Wikipedia style, do free software, open source, everyone contribute style development, was because people were not economically rational about it. We should do this because it's a social good, important to do for that reason. And I think that that's sort of where I'm proposing to go with the Livelihoods SaaS model, is that you do it because it's social good, but it also works as an economic model. And again, it's already being done, it's just not really a conscious movement yet. So, Discourse. You may not have heard about Discourse, but you've probably seen that little notification if you've been logged into any web form in a long time. And Discourse is basically bringing web forums back. Everyone had shut down their forums, and now every community is if they're not on Slack, they probably have a Discourse. Drupal doesn't yet, but I've been invited to 20 Discourse instances. It's almost as many instances as Slack. And they have very clearly state sort of the Livelihoods SaaS principles, some of them. There is only one version of Discourse, the awesome open source version. There's no super secret special paid commercial version with better and more complete features. Because Discourse is 100% open source forum software, now and forever, it belongs to you as much as it belongs to us. That's how community works. That's their quote. And that captured it perfectly. So there's people doing it with a very conscious thing. This is a very successful company. They have lots of paid instances of Discourse, but you can also host it yourself. And then there's Ghost, which is a fellow PHP CMS sort of targeted towards journalists. There's Wallabag, which is a bookmark, read it later, now called Pocket, a service like that, that you can just pay for instead of hosting yourself. But if you want to host it yourself and do different things with it, you can. Tendency is Django, or at least Python-based. Anyhow, it's association membership management is their thing. CryptPad, Zero Knowledge Cloud, backup and stuff. Write.as, Writely is the software. It was called Overleaf. It's basically LaTeX, the scientific markup, document markup language, as a service. Commit changes, donations, Standard Notes is just standard notes, but they have a hosted version or hosted parts of it that's completely 100% the stack from the from the user interface all the way to everything they host it on is completely free and open. If you wanted to run your own Standard Notes server, you could. And technically you could compete with them, but because they're first, because they're associated with the contributors, it's very unlikely that someone's going to just take their code and do a competing service. And if we're more conscious as people about this model of supporting the development with the hosting whenever we can, we can probably help ensure that there isn't any rip-offs. And then, of course, there's WordPress. I did not even put WordPress on any slide when I give this kind of talk for a while, because unlike Discourse, which makes a very strong value statement and moral value and the value to you as the user of it, knowing that you have control of it, WordPress.com doesn't make any of these claims, even though it's like WordPress is pretty famous and presumably people going to WordPress.com are going to know there's an open source version, so maybe they feel they don't need to say that, they don't put the freedom to have a fully equivalent site move to different hosting where you can hack it at will is not directly promised anywhere WordPress.com. And so I'm not 100%, it actually is a full free stack, but all the key aspects of it, like Jetpack, which is another automatic, WordPress.com is run by Automatic, and Jetpack is an automatic produced module for WordPress to make it more performant and everything, is completely open source. And then WordPress.org is not even though Automatic, the company, has a lot of influence, it's separate. So maybe that's why they don't talk about it. But anyhow, I think it's unfortunate they don't more strongly list their free software nature as a key advantage, because it is a big advantage compared to competitors like Wix, Weebly, and Squarespace. If you're picking where you're going to go, it's go with the one that's not going to lock you into their platform. The basic benefit of open source free software, no vendor lock-in, that is one of the points of overlap that both the free software movement and the open source sort of less about the values and more about the business use cases both really make that point that no vendor lock-in is a key thing, and that's what you also get with Libre SaaS. So WordPress free to start with 5 ways to grow, but they don't mention the self-hosting option. But there is move.wordpress.com on how you can move off, so it's fully supported. So I'm going to call them Libre SaaS until someone tells me there's some secret proprietary thing somewhere in the stack. But as far as I can tell, except maybe the premium themes at the higher e-commerce level or business and e-commerce level, it's completely free software. Though I couldn't actually even figure out if WooCommerce was. But WordPress is much less big about that as a community, even though their openness as a community has been part of why they're so successful, and that the openness of the community is built in large part on the openness of the software. But that's where companies are successfully copying that model of the community model. Like Salesforce, completely proprietary in its core, has one of the most vibrant user and configurer, not developer, communities out there, and they've consciously fostered this. So it's really this illusion of, it's a true community, but it's sort of the illusion of community power and control. And so I think that by making what elements are needed for people to really be in control of their own lives and control of the communities they're part of, we can have a competitive advantage for actually doing it free. So, to Drupal. So I'm triply excited about building Drupal as a service, especially as a platform cooperative, or multiple companies doing it as platform cooperatives, is cooperative platforms where it's one member, one vote. So you're giving, it's the old thing, it's if it's, the cloud is just other people's computers. If you collectively own the computers in the cloud, they're your computers. And I think that level of control is also can be part of a competitive advantage in the pitch. So, but building Drupal as a service, it's tech that gives us the power to coordinate. Building it is itself necessarily an exercise in communication, and we can pioneer the next iterations of community self-management and community organization. And yeah, we need to build more tech to do all of this I'm talking about, to coordinate it all. And again, we've sort of the free software movements and associated open movements have given the world new ways to organize, and proprietary companies have stolen some of the magic there, but I think by bringing in cooperation and actually one member, one vote, and that level of actual legal control is something to finally circumvent the constant co-optation of both our software and our ways of organizing as a community, and along with a lot of other things. So, first thing we have to say about Drupal as a service is a history of failure. There is Bright a long time ago. I should get the dates in my notes, but I'm going to be updating. I meant to say at the beginning, anything that I mention, I'm going to try to source in an accompanying blog post. It's already up, but I need to keep adding more sources to it. There'll be links to everything. And that link will be at the end of the talk. But Bright was sort of hosted Drupal, and really a lot of people think that part of the reason it fell apart was the cost of what to do with the Drupal upgrade. Oh great, we have 10,000 sites. Now we need to go from Drupal, I don't know what it was at the time, 4.7 to 5, which was a major version upgrade. 4.6 to 4.7, that was a major version. 4.7 to 4.5 was a major version, and then we got smarter about our versioning numbers, and it was, after that, 5 to 6. Civic Space, which was Drupal plus Civi CRM, which is a constituent relationship manager, really came out of the 2004 Howard Dean campaign for president. Dean Space was where people were organizing, it was a sort of this combination of people organizing for political reasons and using empowering software that actually supported their freedom. And they tried to make a service out of that. It was priced a little bit high. I don't think that one gained a lot of usage, but I mean, there was a time where Civic Space was a better known brand than Drupal. And that's when I first tried Drupal. And because Civi CRM was packaged with it, and because all modules loaded their entire code when you went to the admin modules page back at this time in Drupal 4.7 era, it crashed on my local computer. Well, if this thing can't even run with one user, how is it possibly going to work as people? So I stayed away from Drupal for a whole year because I tried the combined with Civi CRM first. But if I'd actually had a way to just sign up on Civic Space to use it, if that part had been running when I tested it and there was a freemium model, I probably would have been wow, I can see what I can do with it before I ran into the technical problems. And right now, you try to start with Drupal, you're going to hit technical problems first. And then there's so many of these other options. But anyhow, Drupal Gardens was the latest, Drupal 7 as a service that Acquia did. And a lot of people used and liked. And this is where we come back to the design conference. It's really great for designers. You don't have to install the software. You don't have to do any coding. You can't anyway, it's a service. You just configure. But still, you have a good start there, and then you can tweak the theme. And none of these were Libre SaaS. And Drupal Gardens actually lives on as Acquia's Site Factory, which is Acquia's proprietary solution to the issue of running many sites that they sell to others. And so, because lots of organizations do need to run many similar sites. So in some ways, this is a solved problem. It's just not as solved in the public space, although there are a lot of things doing that, and we'll talk more about that soon. So we need to pay attention to these failures of Drupal as a service, even if they weren't making the most of them weren't making the case for the open source LibreSAS model I'm talking about. But G8 is different. Most important, it's not going to murder us on the upgrade path, because that's probably why Acquia stopped supporting Drupal Gardens, was because it was just, for mostly free sites, way too expensive to figure out how to upgrade them. I think, I've been in Drupal since 2006. I've never thought of Drupal as a service as viable, for at least from where I was standing as a small web development cooperative. Now I think it is. I really think it's different. Primarily because it won't murder us in the upgrade path, but also because there's so much more you can do with configuration. But here are the successes. Now, you may have noticed I'm not a huge fan of giant corporations, and these aren't the logos I was planning to show in this talk, and I really hate Sony because a bad quality Sony videotape ruined a high school video project. And so I just held a grudge, like bad quality control, like I'm not gonna use your stuff. And then the NBC Universal is old, like that's actually owned by Comcast now. And Comcast is like actually one of the most hated companies in the United States for good reason. They provide terrible service, and they own all this. Anyhow. But they contributed a ton to Drupal because they had the need. Sony employed Earl Miles while he created views. Like they didn't say, "Oh, I'm going to pay you to do this for the community." Like, we need this because we have like 1,000 sites for artists, and we need to list their upcoming events and all their songs and their albums. And Earl Miles was like, "All right, I'm going to do that." And he had the time and the money to do that, and he, because of his personal values, contributed it back to Drupal. And that's like in the history of Drupal, that's a pretty seismic event. Was like, oh, you don't need to write any code to make completely crazy arbitrary lists of things and format those lists in any way. So that's how we got views, was Sony. And then I didn't get it in my notes, but NBC Universal contributed a great deal to the multilingual effort in Drupal in Drupal 7. So less seismic event, but it was really solid contribution because it was meeting their need, and they sort of got bought into the sports communities. And then there's universities. It's the University of Minnesota. And they have a Drupal Lite and a Drupal Enterprise. And in Drupal 8, they're working for a way to be you can actually just seamlessly move from one to the other on their Drupal 8 platform. This platform is only open within the university. If you get a job there, you can see all the code, but they don't share it elsewhere. And there's a lot of, part of the movement that would support this is the movement to support free software generally, which one of the things says that if a government funds the production of software, it should be open, period. Everyone should be able to see the code and audit it and use it for their own purposes. And so there have been laws proposed, and there are laws on the books in some places that make that. And that would be pretty seismic shift. There would be so much more free software, and the government would probably be having, on better stuff because they'd be automatically collaborating with larger communities. So this is Tim, the MIT Beaver. Is he going to stand for some gopher having a better platform? So there is a Drupal cloud that MIT runs, which is pretty universally not liked because they basically built it and didn't do anything else and don't believe in continuing to maintain it. They maintain it, but they don't believe in enhancing it anyway. So if anyone has contacts in MIT, to make an actual functional cloud service in Drupal 8, which is definitely a need, I really would like to work with that because it's basically the same thing. We're talking about Drupal as a service, nice focused use, and I think that different colleges could really be working together on that. And so it's not something that I've had time to sort of shake and track down leads. Anyway, interested in that particular model of LibreSAS, of doing Drupal as a service, I would love to help in any way I can or collaborate on that. So that's LibreSAS Drupal. let's get to what is currently being done with Drupal in free software hosted, and that paying for that, paying for it as a service, paying for it to be available, you are also contributing to development. So, Centauro, Commerce Guys, this is launched, I think, these pictures from, where's my mid-camp, my glass, launched that last mid-camp. So that if you haven't heard of Commerce Guys rebranding to Centauro, I'm sure the website's redirect, but it's good to know. So they're rebranding as they move to offering software as a service. They're planning on taking the especially tricky bits of commerce that you might not want to have to deal with running on your site and running it on their service. And Ryan Thrama, who has run an amazing sort of Drupal commerce community since when he started UberCart, encapsulated the Libre SaaS ideals beautifully when he added that in addition to the no lock-in part of being fully GPL Libre software, and that sort of value to the customers and the world, the promise of greater collaboration with people is why they don't go proprietary SaaS. They want to keep that collaboration open. So, I think that being aware of this, we can make there to be limits of the collaboration that groups can get out of us with just closed source software, proprietary software. Round Earth. So this is probably going in reverse chronological order of when these services started. We have Round Earth by MyDrop Wizard. MyDrop Wizard is probably best known for supporting Drupal 5 sites and Drupal 6 sites. And so, you're not going to be forced to move to Drupal 8. Like, there will be MyDrop Wizard, and I think one other company supporting earlier versions of Drupal a disturbingly long time. But Drupal 8 is better, and so one of the things they've done with their resources from being helping maintain all the old sites is they've invested in what is a potential future for Drupal. So they're combining Drupal with Civi CRM again, just like Civic Space, and offering a nonprofit management solution in the cloud. And they've done a couple of betas, and it is certainly nice to not have to install Civi CRM. And so they've contributed a fair amount to Drupal 8 and Civi CRM integration has sort of been their main contribution to the software they're hosting here. OpenSocial by Goal Gorilla took what had been a Drupal 7 project, I think, for sort of a huge internal community in the Greenpeace environmental not-for-profit, and have tried to package up that learning into sort of like an internal social network for large not-for-profits, for people to effectively collaborate and organize, and replacing like more boring intranets. And it's for large organizations, so it's at a relatively high price point. GroupofFive is another one built on Drupal 8. It's the rooms module, and so it's in addition to you can just use the rooms module and all of the code that they've contributed to make it easy to book, book the space here. Like I'm giving this talk, no one else can book this room while I'm doing it. So if you wanted to do your Libre SaaS Airbnb competitor, like this is what could power it. They have a lot of, like Commerce Guys, they've put a lot of their code like outside of Drupal, so it can actually be used by other PHP projects also. But they have a full booking engine that then they use in the Rooms module, and then they also let you create sort of white label booking services as a service, and that's been going on for quite a while. Probo CI is not Drupal itself, but it's built by ZivTech, a longtime Drupal company, and that's the automated testing. Does this branch pass? Okay, it can be merged in, type of thing. There's also Farmier, a Drupal 7 distribution that's available through a hosted service farmier.com. It's built on Drupal 7 and is for farms and with a bit of a focus on farms that want to have a direct relationship with their end customers. And then openchurchsite.com, which has a Drupal 8 version already, and it's Drupal as a service available for churches. And Drutopia is the initiative that I'm involved with to try to do Drupal as a service for grassroots groups. So in some ways, even down market of everything we've talked about, even the other ones for nonprofits, which might be a financial model. I'm not recommending that as like the best way to make money in Drupal as a service, but it's the groups we want to help empower, and we want to bring the coordinating power of Drupal to as many people as possible. And so Drutopia is sort of an ecosystem of distributions, trying to do a lot of work to make it so that you can actually share configuration easily between sites, which is sort of where Drupal has a huge amount of space to grow now that you can contribute to Drupal by just configuring it. And if you had a way to share that configuration easily with other people, like the original goal of the features module, then so the space and breadth of ways you can contribute to Drupal really opens up. So that's a technical thing we're trying to crack. And in general, the ability to have a huge, massive configuration, which is what makes it. Like you do a lot in Drupal 8 with configuration. So that's how you're getting all your listings. That's all your content. So it has events. It has people as a content type, so that you can either list your staff as one staff person at an organization listing them, or the volunteers or whatever, or you can let them manage their own profiles. But it's not tied to the user in that way. And then you can make blog posts and other kinds of articles where the person is referenced in the article, also not directly tied to the user, which is a nice flexible thing. But that's all configuration. And so how do we update? So we've improved the configuration, we've fixed the usability issue. We want to have 1,000 sites at least to make it sustainable. But even when you have 10 sites, which is about where we are with that right now, getting the updates out to all of them is the technical problem that Drutopia is hammering at trying to fix. And Drupal as a whole, the Configuration Management 2 initiative is catching up to where Drutopia set out several years ago. It's called out these problems. Nedra Rogers in particular called out these problems with configuration in Drupal 8, and now the Configuration Management 2.0 initiative is also trying to solve the same problem. So there's some technical problems I feel to be solved before Drupal as a service can really take off. But if you're interested in helping solve them from that standpoint, Drutopia is the place to go. And so Drutopia intends to be a cooperative platform. Each person who has a site on it is one vote in deciding how the collective resources are used, what development is done. So back to the question mark, why not more? Because every cloud service you can think of, every software as a service, pretty much all the big platforms you can think about are invariably built on mostly free software, on a mostly free software stack. The operating system, the server, the programming languages, the databases, the libraries, all of it. And then they're making, in some cases, huge amounts of money on a relatively thin slice of proprietary code, pulling it all together. And why can't Floss move into that? And my thing is that part of that, I think, is just lack of awareness of the business model, and then explaining its benefits to end users. So the Drupal Cooperative Cloud. Double trees are a symbol of cooperatives. I was in a cooperative for 6 years before I knew that, so it's not, don't expect everyone to know that symbol. And then, so in Drupal, the benefits of a Libre SaaS offering as a cooperative are the code, an economic base for code contributions. For customers, it's convenient and no lock-in. And this can apply to many software communities. And again, WordPress is probably the prime example of free software as a service right now. But Drupal 8, again, is particularly well suited for LibreSAS, especially if we can figure out some things in configuration sharing and configuration updating. So, big thing is community. Like, new participants can get started. And so, but easily. Knowing that they don't have the dead end or Wile E. Coyote situation of the ground being pulled out from under them. And so that's, yeah. I mean, essentially, I see this huge gap between like how people in my era got into web development and how you can now. It's like you need to build something for an organization, so you download and do it. And so you have this path to becoming a contributor, part of a community, configuring, doing development. You have a path to being a developer now. Like, you could start building on some other proprietary platform. You can, and people are making their entire careers on Squarespace and programs like that, but it's not one under their control, and it's not under the control of their clients. But the walled gardens are winning, and it's a quote from Discourse. The walled gardens are winning because they have a superior user experience fueled by data and technical capabilities not easily available to competitors on the open web. But that doesn't change the fact that we, the users of these sites, are the network we bring into being the value on these sites. And open platforms have disadvantages to closed, mostly in the making of upfront investments, where one entity controls the platform and can capture the value more easily. So you have the thing of venture capital pouring a ton of money into something, basically only works, they only get their money back if who they give the money to ends up with a monopoly. Like, both Uber and Lyft aren't going to make money if they both continue to exist. They'll keep burning money. It's only when one can get a monopoly and jack up the prices that they get it. And so, we're sort of in this era where we're being outcompeted, but partly it's on sort of fraudulent grounds. And I think not just by pairing the cooperative element with LibreSAS, saying that you can invest in a platform to do what you need as an owner of that platform, that there's a lot more incentive to put money in advance to build something, and that we can sort of get that kickstart that venture capital funded proprietary software has right now. But the App Store model is sort of the king of taking other people's contributions and capturing the value. And there may be a developer revolt there too. Like, if we can make platforms that are not controlled, but just to explain the App Store model, which, free software has had package managers for forever. Like, Drupal.org is like an app store. Like, you go there and you pick whatever project you want. Like, this concept was invented by people who had open contributions. And it wasn't something that was part of the original iPhone. It was completely locked down. You'd get what Apple gave you. But like, people wanted to build for it. And so like, developers basically hacked their way into the platform. And Apple's like, oh, okay, well, we'll give you like this extremely locked down version of a Ubuntu Debian package manager. It's an extremely locked down version of Drupal.org's module list. And so Benjamin Mako Hill, is basically saying it's how these companies can get the benefits, benefits of things like peer production and open contributions, capture all the value of that without getting their hands covered in freedom. And I did want to say that also, like, the idea of LibreSAS is explicitly not Amazon Web Services, which is like the thinnest of thin layers. Like, it's like we're taking things that are completely free software, and this MongoDB, just talking with Jake about that, MongoDB is like, is actually trying to like unfree software themselves in order to stop Amazon from just taking their work and selling it without contributing back at all. So I do think there is an opportunity also to keep the software fully free if there's a more understanding of there, but also just as web developers, stop giving Amazon profits. They use it for things like bidding on facial recognition to round up immigrants. We should stop funding Amazon. But Other movements, shared protocols and open data, indie webcam. So this is the goal of making things like sort of a different model from LibreSAS. But the model is that lots of little completely independent parts working together, but giving the same user experience of the platform. So like having, so I think I'm close to time, so yeah. Oh no, okay. I think I go until noon? I'm not sure. Anyhow, sorry, I'll leave. I didn't actually look that up before I started. But shared protocols and open data can do a lot of the same things. The idea is that and so this is the Fediverse, the Mastodon, if people have been I'm leaving Twitter for Mastodon, if you've seen anyone say that, this is something they set up their own instance, and each instance that's set up is supposed to be able to work with the others. And then Indie WebCamp is the idea that we all have our own websites, but if I want to leave a comment on your website, I can do it just as easily as I could on Facebook, because we both have websites and they can talk to each other. And that's Indie WebCamp in a nutshell. And it's doing open protocols for that kind of stuff is fantastic. But LibreSAS can sort of add a business model to that. So open platforms have the advantage that more companies can try out their ideas, more different needs can be served over the long haul, and that if users owned Facebook instead of some investors, you would have, there's lots of things you wouldn't have. You wouldn't have them turning off their cameras, turning off your live stream when the police are about to shoot you. I can talk about that later. I took it out of the center of the talk. It was too much. That happened. The whole thing of your corporation working with some random local government to be just turn off their live stream because we might want to do something. Facebook, sure. And that's so the dystopian things have happened, and we mostly don't know about it. But if users own Facebook, there would be there would not be the incentive to hold the data, is I guess the main thing. So there would be Facebook would just work fine with Twitter. There would be the people acting in their own interests, even if they love a platform, would want to see it interoperate with others. And so if we can get any LibreSAS things where people are paying for their hosting of Mastodon, the Twitter-like one, or paying for anything like that, which as people get more and more freaked out by Facebook and some of its antics, that seems more likely to happen. Then there's an economic model for actually supporting indie webcamp style open protocols and moving things around. And then just open source needs LibreSAS. This is the old chart which stole from how difficult games are and stuck Drupal and Joomla and WordPress and stuff on it instead. Drupal is the line where your learning curve is impossible. But what this chart got different with wrong actually is that they have it start way too high. Drupal actually, the learning curve starts much closer to Joomla and WordPress. You can get started, and then you can get tangled into 60 million different subsystems it has. But you're already hooked on the power, and so you get on this thing. But now basically every single project you have to download to start using is basically that cliff to get started. And no one gets started on a cliff. Our on-ramp to having contributors is severely constrained, in part because there's no way to just spin up a site and play with it. And so I wanted to mention Glitch, which is, I think, a fully open source stack, but it's trying to tackle the same thing. It's how do we keep making things on the web something that's open to people just come along and doing? And so we have a lot of overlap of goals with that. And so, the main thing about LibreSAS is a business model that works for free software, even if 80% of the people don't care whether it's free or not. We're paying for a service, we don't care if that service is supported by, is the people offering that service are building proprietary code or they're building open source free software code. Most users don't care, but if we have a minority that really does care, no, I will switch to any service that actually gives me my full freedom and control of the code, gives me that potential of going off the platform, gives me that sort of tool to build coordination community with, I will go with that. And that 20% can be the difference to move us towards LibreSaaS, free software everywhere, instead of like having the value sucked out by the people. The proprietary level is at the last step. So it's enterprise and movement friendly, and that's easy to get started, and people can take full ownership of it later. So that's sort of the big value proposition of LibreSaaS. Easy to get started, you can have full control. So LibreSaaS platform cooperatives cooperative platforms is what I'm talking about. If you're interested, please talk to me or Mickey, and I can take questions now. And like I said, all links will be up on that blog post there.